Well, hey there, cats and kittens. It's your main man broadcasting live from Maryland's beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains. And that's all I got. That's all I got. I got to a certain point and then I couldn't think of anything else to say with that ridiculous voice. So hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thank you all for being here. As usual, I will be answering questions that were pre-submitted on Patreon. So if you have a question or a comment, or you have something that you want to say that you hope I will see in the live chat, and you're with me in the live chat right now, just hold on to it. Especially if you have, like, you were planning on donating a super chat or something like that. You know what? Thank you, Some Random Geek. I forgot to put Picard on my microphone stand. Boy, Some Random Geek is on top of shit, folks. He's really like an unofficial producer for the show. And I say unofficial because in no way is he compensated for this at all. Here's Picard. There's my little Jean-Luc. Where's he at? There. So stand him right there. Turn his head toward the camera. Tilt him up a little. There he is. So anyway, now that that's out of the way, yeah, I'm going to be answering questions pre-submitted on Patreon first. So if you're with me in the live chat and you have a question or a comment or something you want me to respond to, please hold on to it until I get through all of the patron questions. So without further ado, let's get to the patron questions, shall we? The first one is from Ayame, who says, "What's your favorite modern cartoon and why?" This is a really tough question because, and the definition of modern cartoon, I have been told in a supplemental conversation to the question, is year 2000 or later. So it's tough because there have been some really, really good animated series that have been produced since the year 2000. But if I had to pick one, and maybe this is just because it's relatively recent, but for me, it would probably be BoJack Horseman. And I would say it would be BoJack Horseman because BoJack is simultaneously incredibly funny and also really, really moving. Like it works as drama and as comedy, and it succeeds splendidly on both of those levels. And any show, animated or live action, that can do that is gonna get high marks for me, because that is very tough to be the kind of show that can excel at making people laugh and making people cry or getting people really seriously emotionally invested in the characters. And for me, BoJack Horseman did that very, very well. I thought it was a fantastic show. It just finished its run in January. It wrapped up its final season. And I thought it was terrific. I thought it was a really, really beautiful ending. And it's just a great show. So for me, my favorite modern cartoon at this point, as I sit here answering this question, is BoJack Horseman. Next question is from Some Random Geek, who says, "So why do I, Some Random Geek, hate landlords? I think it is pretty simple. Landlords are not needed. Everything a landlord supposedly does can be done by tenant unions. Landlords are just the middleman or middle person. They don't actually provide anything. Construction builders are the ones that actually provide apartment buildings and houses. Landlords, in fact, do the opposite of providing housing. They take the houses that were built for people to live in, hold them hostage to rent, and evict anyone who can't pay. It is just like how I am against the commodification and profiting of essential and necessities of life. Housing is a human right, just like food, water, utilities, education, heating, transportation, entertainment, and the internet. And landlords, as well as businesses, profiting off of folks' needs for these things are immoral and must be stopped. And this is all because of capitalism, which is why capitalism must be stopped. These recent issues with COVID-19 just exacerbate the problem with housing being restricted for profits, as some landlords have sent out callous emails and letters to tenants pretty much saying, "I know you are concerned about the coronavirus, but could you please make sure that your rent is paid ahead of time?" Even while some have lost their jobs because businesses had slowed down and are shut down due to the pandemic. Typically, are landlord corporations such as property companies that own most of the housing that is available and simply don't care about the tenants themselves. They just care about the money they make off the tenants, just like GameStop doesn't really care about their employees and customers' health. They only care about making money, even during this pandemic. Do liberals simply not understand that when I say kill all landlords, it is a joke? Or do they think I am serious, like I seriously want to hashtag eat the rich? And why can't liberals simply stop thinking on the individual level and my uncle is a cop when anarchists make systemic critiques by saying hashtag all cops are bastards? And what are the massive worlds of difference between a homeowner and a tenant? Homeowners just typically owe money to a bank instead of a landlord. At least they typically get the plumbing fixed if there is a problem. When has a bank done that? I really don't know what I'm supposed to say to that. There's really not a question. I would appreciate it if you could at least go through the pretense of putting a question in there for me to respond to, since, that's the whole premise of the show. But yeah, I mean, I largely agree with you. Like, I think we agree that housing, that shelter is one of the basic human needs and therefore should be a right. It's something that people ought to be able to have access to regardless of whether they can pay for it or not. It should be it is a basic human right, and it should be treated that way. So, no, I don't think it should be treated like a commodity, just like I don't think that healthcare should be treated like a commodity or any other essential for life. So we agree on that, very, very, very strongly. And I also agree with you that, it is a lot of people, I think when people try to disprove or argue against systemic critiques by making individual arguments, that gets a little frustrating, because if you're saying it's not that every individual landlord is an evil person who is willfully trying to exploit and hurt people, the problem is that there is a system in place that creates barriers to people having homes, to having places to live that should not be there. And the existence of landlords and the idea of, well, you can have a place to live as long as you can pay for it, that is a barrier to people who need places to live getting those places to live, and that barrier just should not be there. I agree with you for the most part with what you said there. Next question is from David Colby. Pitch: you have been given the job of directing and writing the next Superman movie, but the casting has already been done, and in a desperate bid for stunt casting, they got Idris Elba as Superman. Since you're not a racist, you recognize that this is awesome because Idris Elba is cool as fuck and a great action star. But how would you write a black Superman? Or would you want to find a black author to handle it so you don't mess it up by being an idiot white guy? Also, the first of my published novels, The Murder Stroke, is already back up on Amazon. It's about a boy who gets launched via magical artifact into the world of the ancient Christian church, into the world to which, I guess, the ancient Christian church banished the old Norse, Egyptian, and Greek gods. There's lots of action, adventure, and boning. The usual. Yeah, I suppose it would be the usual, wouldn't it? Yeah, I think I would want to at least put together a writer's room for the show that had some non-white writers. If we're going to write a black Superman, I would certainly not want to take that job on all by myself, because as you point out, like as a dipshit white person, I would not want to screw that up. Ideally, it would just not be my job. Like ideally, a black filmmaker, a black screenwriter, a black director with a really great idea, with a really great take on the character would be the person to make a black Superman movie. But if it somehow fell to me and it was my job, yes, I would certainly want to involve black screenwriters in that process and crafting that story and having a lot of input in how the movie came out. Because, yeah, I mean, I just don't, I would not feel comfortable doing it all by myself, by any means. Next question is, and by the way, David Colby's, I forgot to mention, David Colby's novel that he promoted at the end of his question there, the link is in the description of this video. So if you want to go on Amazon and check out the Kindle version of David's book that he was just describing at the end of his question, the link is in the description underneath the charity links. So please check that out. Okay, now, David Appleman, greetings, fellow atheist nerd. How do you feel about us Floridians in the beach community? I've witnessed groups over the past 2 weeks that would seem large under normal circumstances. Carry out margaritas generally mean the party is just happening elsewhere. Edit. I guess DeSantis is exempting churches from our new safer at home order. Yeah, for some reason, I know there have been some people. I just saw on Facebook the other day, the Psy Babe was venting about a podcast she had just recorded with someone who seemed to be under the impression that basically the stay-at-home order just means stay in somebody's house. Like you can still go to other people's houses as long as you stay in the house and you don't go out like to a restaurant or something. And having to explain to this person, like, no, the whole point is to minimize your contact with other people as much as possible. So don't go to, like, house parties are not okay. Don't invite a bunch of people over to your house in the middle of a pandemic and say, well, as long as we're just at the house and we're not going out, it's okay. Because people gathering together in close proximity where the virus can spread, if somebody is carrying it, that's what allows it to spread. So don't do that. Stay at your house with just the people who are normally there and don't go out any more often than you have to. That's the whole point. And yeah, I mean, it's frustrating. It's frustrating seeing people until recently who were like gathered at the beach in large numbers, as though everything was normal, as though there was nothing unusual going on. It's frustrating. I mean, the CDC just earlier today, I saw that the CDC has officially recommended that people wear masks when they go outside, just broadly saying if you're going to go out, have a face mask on. And I feel like part of the reason they have, found it necessary to do that is because so many of us are just not listening to the guidelines. Like, we're not staying home as much as we should. We're not taking it as seriously as we should. I feel like and it's not completely our fault, because the government response, especially the federal government response, has been completely botched from the very beginning. We were told from the White House for a month leading up to them starting to finally kind of get serious about it, that this was nothing to worry about, that it was business as usual, that there was no reason for us to change any of our typical patterns of behavior. And if we had gotten in front of this a little earlier and started social distancing and started some of the things that we're doing now a month before we started, we almost certainly would not be in the situation that we are currently in. So it's not completely our fault, but it is our fault to a certain extent, because common sense tells you if a bunch of people are vulnerable to a highly communicable disease that is spread when people come into contact with each other, and it's becoming a really big problem, it's going to threaten the lives of a lot of people, just stay at your goddamn house unless you absolutely have to leave. Don't go to the beach. Don't go to parties. Unless you have to go out and get food or, some other kind of necessity, stay at your fucking house. And a lot of people just have not been doing that. A lot of people and I know there are people who work in essential jobs who have to keep going out and thank you for your service, everybody who is an essential worker and has to keep going out into this and go to work every day. I mean, you are really keeping everything running. But there are people who are home from work, who are home from school, who are not in an essential field, who are off and are still going out like on a semi-regular, irregular basis as though nothing is wrong. And that's really super frustrating, whether they're going to the beach or wherever the hell they're going. Next question is from Andrew Michael. Ahoy, Steve. Hope all's well in quarantine. I still haven't gotten used to the government paying me £1,300 a month to not go to work, but amen bless them for it. I'm going to be a sneaky bastard and ask 2 questions, and I fully expect you to answer both. Question the first: has Führer Trump actually offered any financial support for Americans to ensure they don't lose their income or employment, or is he still calling COVID-19 a Democrat hoax? My proper Trek question is, I don't think transgender would still be a thing in Star Trek. With surgical procedures so sophisticated, they can make a Bajoran almost indistinguishable from a Cardassian, or a Romulan practically identical to a human. I suspect it'd be a fairly routine appointment. Like a 14-year-old boy visits the doctor and says, I was feeling a bit unsettled a few weeks ago, so I had a meeting with a counselor, and we determined I'm in the wrong body. I know I'm not male, so can I book a gender alteration to female, please? The doctor replies, "Sure, how's tomorrow afternoon?" Years later, Barney Crusher goes on to become the CMO of the Enterprise and now goes by the name Beverly. I reckon the Ferengi wouldn't have the same outlook because they're oppressively patriarchal, and while the Klingons view women as equals in combat, art, science, and engineering, they still have traditions that place men in authority by default, though if a Klingon woman does gain power, they seem to be treated as equal there too. Do you reckon any characters could have been originally born into a different gender to the one we see on screen? Well, as to your first question, yes, there will be pretty minimal financial, according to the bill that has been passed, unless they pass additional legislation to provide more help on top of what is already coming. There, a lot of people will be getting one-time $1,200 checks in the coming weeks and months. The first checks that will be targeted to those who are the most financially vulnerable will be going out, I think, next week. The IRS announced that they're going to start sending out the relief checks very, very soon. And you get it depending on how much income I think it's how much income you reported last year. So if you reported, I think, $10,000 in income or less, you get yours first. And then after that is $20,000, and it keeps going up in increments. So the less you made, the sooner you get your relief check. But it's just as far as I know, it's just a one-time thing. Which is going to, I mean, it's better than nothing. It's going to help some people out a little bit, but it's certainly not anywhere near the amount of support that a lot of people will need to, survive, maintain even a decent quality of life while they're home from work. And as for the Trek thing, I think it depends on how you are defining transgender, because I think you're right. I don't think transitioning would be at all a big deal in the 23rd or 24th century of Star Trek. I think you're spot on there. But if we continue to define a trans person as a person whose gender does not match the gender they were assigned at birth, then technically you would still have trans people. I think you would essentially be in a situation where you would still have trans people, but basically everybody, sorry, Jean-Luc, but basically everybody who wanted to pass would be the situation. So they would still be trans people, but it would not be as much of an issue. And hopefully by the time we get to the enlightened Federation of the 23rd and 24th century, there would be no stigma attached to being trans anyway. So even if people did know that you were trans or could tell that you were trans by looking at you or whatever, that would not be an issue for anybody anyway. But so I think if we go by the current broadly accepted definition of a trans person, there would still be trans people, because that just means that your gender is different than the one you were assigned at birth. But the transition process would be a lot smoother and a lot easier for people to go through, which would be nice, which would be very nice. And as for what characters could possibly have been born trans and Star Trek, I don't know. I mean, canonically, nobody is. But hypothetically, or I guess if we're going by the idea that anybody could have a gender confirming surgery, that would be no big deal. It could be anybody, right? It could be anybody, and it wouldn't matter, which I think is kind of the point. Next question is from Joe McClory. You have made it clear your feelings about not voting against Trump regardless of how much someone dislikes the nominee. I don't disagree with the level of harm Trump would likely continue to do. However, I was planning to donate again to Bernie's general election campaign if he were to make it, and maybe even the DNC if they had moved to enthusiastically support him, as well as phone banking, and maybe even, when it became safe to do so, even campaigning in person. I don't think I will be doing any of that for Biden. I want Trump to lose, but I don't feel strongly about wanting Biden as president. I may even spend the money I was going to spend to support the presidential election to instead support progressive House and Senate members that the DNC are likely to ignore or even work against. In your opinion, is this a good choice? Is it more important to you that we win the election or that we move the party closer to our values? Well, I don't. I think you're offering kind of a false choice there at the end. I think that's a great idea. I think if you are not, if you're not as gung-ho about Biden being the nominee as you would be about Bernie, and you decide to vote for Biden, but to direct your financial support to other candidates, I think that's great. I have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. I think that's a terrific way to be. What really bothers me and worries me is people who say, well, I'm just not going to participate. Well, if my guy doesn't get the nomination, then I'm out. I'm staying home. Right. That I find incredibly frustrating and incredibly immature and short-sighted, especially given the prospect of 4 more years of President Trump. But your idea of, well, I'll vote for Biden because he's better than Trump, but he doesn't really excite me. I'm not super thrilled with the prospect of him being president, so I'll vote for him, but I'll give my financial support to other more progressive candidates down the ballot. I think that's fantastic. I think that's a really great compromise to continue to support progressive candidates and I think we should always be supporting the most progressive candidates that we can on the ballot for any given election. And doing that I think is great. And I think and there's practical value to that as well, because if you support the more progressive candidates financially and you campaign for them and phone bank for them and do whatever you can for them above and beyond voting, then you are increasing their chances of winning the election. And obviously, yes, winning the election is a very, very important thing. And you're also, if they win the election, you are helping to move the party closer to our progressive values. So I think you can accomplish both things. And yeah, I think what you're proposing is terrific. And I would encourage you very strongly to do it. I think that's great. Next question is from Stacy Povey. Hi, Steve. Silly question. What do you suppose a Federation public toilet is like? With multiple species, it was at least observed by Bones that not everyone keeps their genitals in the same place. So presumably it's the same for their excretion orifices. I figure TNG uses holosuite tech, but original series I can't figure. This is one of those things that, honest to God, it never occurred to me before I read your question. I always sort of assumed that most of the species that we see in Star Trek are at least anatomically similar to humans in terms of the rough blueprint. But you're right. There was that scene in Star Trek VI where Martia, right? Martia is the one who says, not everyone keeps their genitals in the same place, Captain. And it's like, oh, shit, I never thought of that. So, yeah, I guess there would have to be some kind of an accommodation. And, yeah, holodeck technology would work for TNG, but for TOS, I guess, I don't know, maybe some kind of elaborate attachment system. I honestly have no idea. It's funny though, when you look at the blueprints in like the technical manuals and stuff, and they show you like on the bridge, they show you where the bathroom is on the bridge, and it's the doorway right across from the doorway that supposedly leads through to the observation lounge. And when you see it in the blueprint, it looks like the blueprint of just a normal modern head, a normal modern bathroom. It looks like it just has a pretty standard toilet and a sink, and it looks just like we would imagine a bathroom would look. But you would have to figure, yeah, and with all the different species serving aboard the ship, and not all of them keeping their genitals and their excretion orifices in the same place, there'd have to be some variety, you would think, right? But I honestly that never occurred to me until your question. So thank you for showing me a beautiful and potentially very, very upsetting new corner of the Star Trek universe. I appreciate it. General Contact Unit Problem Child. Last stream, I said I was worried about delaying the election in case Trump manages to find a way to delay it indefinitely. You said something like, well, if it's not safe, we can't risk our lives by going out to vote. Thing is, I think if Trump did manage to stay in power indefinitely, I think it's a safe bet his continued role and the role of whoever took over for him would ultimately result in more deaths in the long run. Look up eco-fascism if you want to know why I believe that. When I go through that in my head, I can't tell if I'm being pragmatic or if I'm just so frantically devoted to getting Trump out of office, I'm willing to let people die to achieve it. I believe I'm right about Trump ultimately killing more people in the long run, but I can imagine an outside observer calling that a rationalization. I have similar feelings about my feeling about a lot of the legal restrictions being put on us at the moment. I think there's a genuine danger that it could lead to our governments becoming more dictatorial in the future, because them having those kinds of powers will have become normalized. If that's the case, I think maybe not giving them as much power as they'd like to stop the virus is a good idea. But again, I can imagine someone else hearing that and calling it a rationalization. P.S. Speaking of the trolley problem type moral dilemmas, I'd like to remind you that over a year ago, I asked you if you'd be willing to stick to blue no matter who if the Democratic candidate was accused of rape before the election. Really wish that had stayed hypothetical. Boy, you and me both. Yeah, well, the good news is, as far as the election, I neglected to factor into my response last time the possibility of remote voting, of voting by mail, which seems to be the most popular form that people are trying to push for now, in the assumption that, worse comes to worse and things are not back to normal by November, and we are faced with the prospect of people not being safe to go out to the polls to vote. Maybe we could do some kind of mail-in vote. So if we could work something like that, then obviously we have to do that. Obviously, a mail-in election that would be legitimate is better than no election at all, or a delayed election or something like that. So hopefully, if we're in a situation where we can't do an in-person election by November, we can do something like that. We can do an election by mail and still have an election. And as for the having to choose between two accused rapists, yeah, I mean, it really is. It's one of those lesser of two evils situations. Like we have to vote for the guy who isn't Trump. That's just the way it is. Would I much prefer it if the Democratic Party were to nominate someone who had not been credibly accused of something like that? Yes. But if that is, if that is the situation come November, I'm gonna have to hold my nose and do it, and it sucks, and it's a disgusting indictment of the state of our political system, and in many ways, of course, the state of the Democratic Party, that we would find ourselves in this position where we would have to kind of just pretend that we didn't hear about Biden being accused of this in order to justify voting for him, because the alternative is so fucking horrifying that it's like, fuck, we just have to do this. Obviously it would be better if we were not in this situation, but it appears as though we are going to be in this situation, and it's not good. It's not good at all. A question from Ahoy Erno: has anyone fallen for Michael Whirly as a Poe yet? If I put on my MAGA hat and Sargon beard, he sounds very reasonable, correct, likable. I could imagine our favorite bear/shoe/bird/anime avatar responding in the vein of, if only Steve know how much sense he makes as Whirly. Did anyone work their way to Whirly's sack because they actually like him? Are there people who want to seed him because they genuinely agree with what he says? In real life, no. Not that I am aware of, other than there might be a stray comment here and there that I've gotten from someone who just sort of happened upon the video and hadn't watched the series before and hadn't been aware of my channel, that may have thought that he was a real guy. But even that is very rare. I can think of a handful of times when I've gotten comments from people who seemed to genuinely think that he was a legitimate person and not a parody, and they weren't like playing along, right? They really seemed to be taken in by it. And honestly, I think it's obvious enough that he's a character. I don't know how much more obvious I could make it without just putting a title on the screen, just putting up a lower third for the entire video saying this is a satire, dipshits. I think there are people in real life who agree with the sorts of religious ideas that he has and agree with the political ideas that he has. There are people who think the same way, broadly speaking, that Whirly thinks. But have many people watched those videos and taken him to be a real person who is, doing a real show? No, thankfully not that many people have. Very, very, very few. And the fact that anybody has is a little baffling to me, because to me I never wink. I never wink at the camera and be like, come on, it's all a joke, right? It's done completely straight-faced. But it's still obvious that it's a gag, right? It's gotta be. I mean, like, how more... He simultaneously believes in a flat earth and a hollow earth. Like, how much more obvious can I be that this is a gag? But yeah, so no, not really. Not really. Andrew C. Hawkins, I'm afraid we might have to disagree with regard to Star Trek Picard. It had its enjoyable moments, but overall the writing was wildly uneven, and it failed to stick the landing in the last episode. However, I have an old high school friend who will pop up on Facebook from time to time to spew out a stream of venom about how awful he thinks Star Trek has become. Aside from being annoyed at those who wrap so much of their identities up in being a fan of something that they act as if they own it, and who complain to no end about entertainment, it occurs to me that if Trek writers tried to please that kind of fan, then the show would be far worse. The result would be akin to Star Wars Rise of Skywalker. Any thoughts? I think, yeah, I obviously the solution is not to try and please those fans, because the thing is, as Rise of Skywalker demonstrates, there is no pleasing them. You will not make them happy, because no matter what you show them, they're the kind of people that I talked about when I did my review video earlier this week of the second half of Picard, and I talk about how there are some people who just they compare everything to the imaginary show in their head, and nothing will ever compare to that, because that's an unfalsifiable argument, right? The imaginary show in your head does not exist. So it's as good as you think it is. It's genius. It's perfect. And no actual work is ever going to compare to that. So all these bellyachers who watch Picard and they hate it for this and they hate it for that and they don't like this and they don't like that, and they make some of their arguments are sort of broadly structural. Some of them are the most bullshit, whiny, pissant, nitpicky shit. And nothing, no matter what, I'm convinced, no matter what the show was, they would not have been happy, because it would not have matched exactly their expectation or the thing that they think they are entitled to, or what they think in their infinite wisdom the show should have been, right? So you can't make them happy. You can't make them happy. Rise of Skywalker was an exercise in trying to make those fans happy to a point. I don't think the whole thing was about that, but there clearly were some creative decisions made in the crafting of the story of Rise of Skywalker that were, I think it's reasonable to assume, were intended to try and placate those fans who were all pissy about The Last Jedi. And it didn't work, because there is no placating those fans, because whining and pissing and moaning is what they do. You know, as somebody once said, nobody hates Star Trek as much as Star Trek fans. Nobody hates Star Wars as much as Star Wars fans. There is no pleasing that kind of fan. The best thing to do is to do what I think the writers of Picard genuinely tried to do, and that is to tell their story on their terms as well as they can tell it. And we can judge for ourselves how well they did if we think it was a good show or a bad show or somewhere in the middle. But you can't write the show trying to please the fans as your number one priority. You write the show saying, here's the story we have decided to tell. Here is the best way we can tell this story. And hopefully people like it. Trying to please the fans is a losing game, especially trying to please the malcontents that we're talking about. Next question is from Dr. Babylon. Steve, why do you like it when superhero stories like Superman Returns take their fundamentally goofy concepts and material seriously, but you find it pretentious when epic fantasies like The Lord of the Rings do the same? A lot of it is just personal preference, and it's difficult to quantify that. For whatever reason, I generally find high fantasy like Lord of the Rings to be just incredibly tedious. I'm just not interested in it. Whereas superhero stories, I am very interested in. And I can't really say specifically why that is. But if you show me a Superman story, I'm immediately interested to see what it is. And I might watch it and decide that it's bad, or I might watch it and decide that it's good, or whatever. But if you show me something with like elves and wizards and orcs and shit, I'm immediately bored. there's an obstacle right away where I'm just like, oh God, I'm just not into this. Like, it's just not my thing. So Lord of the Rings has that working against it. And Superman and superhero stories in general do not have that obstacle because I'm that genre. And my computer just froze. So after I'm just not as inclined to like that to like the genre that Lord of the Rings falls into, and I am inclined to like the genre that Superman Returns falls into, and who can say exactly why that is? All right, I'm gonna pop out and pop right back. So hold on, everybody. I'll be right back. Two, I consider myself a libertarian socialist, something, given the North American point of view, that may seem a contradiction in terms. I assure you it is not, which is to say I am no conservative, at least in the traditionally American view. But upon further consideration, why the hell does the left like Star Trek? So much of this show finds itself in a hazy sort of sci-fantasy Venn diagram of technocracy, militarism, and poorly defined economics. Shout out to that Star Trek econ ep you did, that at times only appeals to a knee-jerk egalitarian, and that it's not covertly racist in that way 90% of television tends to be, in the didactic reinforcement of the power and moral correctness of white middle-class values, the heart of which Irami Osai Frimpong correctly observes is the ability to curate which people of color you have around you. With regard to Star Trek, an argument could be had, but I won't make it here. Anyway, is it possible that Trek is actually the realization of neoliberalism pursued to its very, very imagined logical conclusion? People in Trek are their jobs. Whenever you see someone without a clearly defined professional role, they tend to be kind of shifty and unethical, maybe even criminal. Perhaps from some place where civilization has collapsed or there is conflict. Money isn't used until it is, and always has a convenient inroad when the story needs it, and it most often tends to be wielded by elites, where humanish types use it, think Ezri's family. And whenever we see people who are not in Starfleet, they are happy workers of the service sector. We almost never see how they live, or inevitably, as we've seen in Picard, people who have to work outside the system and their lives are in some way damaged. It's still hierarchical, functionally capitalistic, and stabilized by at least one permutation of the state in Starfleet, with enough glimpses of individual enterprise, to dispel any notion of more than cosmetic Marxism. Thank you for enduring this marathon of a question. Well, thank you for the great question. And that, you have put your finger on, I think, what is one of the most common critiques of Star Trek from the left. People who are committed leftists, who are anti-capitalist, who are some shade or another of socialist or Marxist, and believe in a radical reordering of society, have critiqued Star Trek for that reason for quite a few years. And I think it's a very valid observation that the society of the Federation that we see in Star Trek, particularly in the Next Generation era of Star Trek, is basically capitalism without money. Because other than the fact that people don't exchange money for goods and services and don't need money in order to have a decent quality of life, the system doesn't seem that different from the one we have now. You're correct. It is still hierarchical. People are still largely identified by what line of work they are in, and life and the organization of society in general, on Earth at least, does not seem to be all that different than the way it is here. It's just that there is abundance that everybody has access to, and nobody has to worry about being able to afford a place to live, or food, water, shelter, clothing, healthcare, etc., etc., the essentials we've talked about here before. And yeah, from a leftist point of view, from a Marxist point of view, there's plenty about that to critique. You could talk about how unrealistic it is. You can talk about how it preserves all of these hierarchies that, even with something like economic freedom with economic inequality no longer being such a pressing issue, there are still things about all of these unnatural, unjust hierarchies that are harmful, that should be done away with. So yeah, I mean, a lot of leftists don't like Star Trek, or at least don't like it for don't hold it up as an example. Lots of leftists really love Star Trek for all kinds of reasons, but they don't hold it up as an example of an ideal society because it does not look like the ideal society that a Marxist might imagine or propose. And they like it for other reasons. They like it because maybe even though it is not necessarily modeling the kind of economic system that a leftist would prefer, it is still showing a society that where systemic institutionalized racism seems to mostly be gone. Although, as we see in Picard, and I think this is a very important lesson, the institutions are still susceptible to prejudice and racism and bias. It doesn't mean that it's completely wiped away forever. We still need to be vigilant, and we can still be induced to make bad decisions and treat people unfairly based on ignorance and prejudice, even in the enlightened 24th century. But for the most part, these no longer seem to be problems. Racism and sexism and various forms of unjust discrimination and prejudice seem to be largely a thing of the past, or at least are not affecting people's lives in a negative way the way they are here. So, I mean, there are all kinds of reasons to still like Star Trek from a political point of view. But if your primary focus is economics and you want to look at, Star Trek as how it models the economics of the future, yeah, I mean, there are lots of reasons why a leftist would not like it on that level. Next question is from Isaiah Taylor. Hey, Steve, thank you for allowing me to join the Patreon chat last Sunday. It was my first time talking online with people, and it was truly amazing. It was my first time discussing world issues with like-minded individuals as opposed to discussing them with my conservative friends. Before this COVID-19 crisis, I felt alone, adrift in the cold depths of space, metaphorically, of deep despair. Before this crisis, I was broke, little food, doing poor in school, lacking employment, and struggling with my rent. I was feeling trapped in Tallahassee with no hope for my future. I was aimlessly cleaning toilets on the weekends as the world was at warp speed ahead of me. I was a redshift human as the world around me expanded at the speed of light, being left to fend for myself in the rearview mirror. I would spend the weekdays hopelessly applying for jobs and distracting myself with Apollo moon documentaries and working on building model rockets that would take me nowhere. On Instagram, I would see cosplayers, singers, and other public figures flaunt their achievements, and taunt me for being jealous and not wanting to work hard to achieve what they had. I fucking hated those people. They didn't know me or my situation. How dare they judge me for things I couldn't control? I was adrift, lost in the shadow of the universe. Then came coronavirus. Now I walk around a virtually deserted Tallahassee, free of rap music, loud FSU fans. The Instagram stories are devoid of travel and excitement. I like the birds chirping and the wind whistling. Even the severe weather is calming as Mother Nature has launched a counterattack against the human defilement of Earth. As I write this, my rent is good. I have plenty of food. And since I don't have any friends my age, I'm not bothered by the social distancing. I still have my job and a paycheck. I feel strangely happy and at peace in such a dark time. I don't know what will happen next, but like the Voyager probes that I worship, I soldier on, anticipating tomorrow's events. Has 2 decades of hardship and pain prepared me for this moment? Should I thank the coronavirus? Or is that a little creepy? I'm at peace, and as Barry White said, let the music play, and I'm dancing. V'ger is the first, our last, and our everything. Long live Carl Sagan. Sorry for getting preachy. Thoughts? Well, first of all, it was really great to have you on the Patreon hangout with us last time, and I'm really glad that you made it in. And I'm a little surprised to hear you say that was your first time talking with people like that, because I thought you were terrific in the conversation, and I thought you were really good on camera. I mean, I think I certainly would not have assumed that it was your first time in a hangout like that. So great job, and I'm glad you could be with us too. It was a lot of fun talking to you. And yeah, I think what you're feeling is very natural. I think for someone in your position, seeing the world in this different way, and realizing that in some ways it's to your advantage. Like I mean, I think it's sad that things are like that. I think it's sad that it takes something like people staying home en masse for you to feel more comfortable. And that's I don't mean that as a slight against you. I'm not insulting you. I just think it's unfortunate that is the situation, But I don't think there's anything wrong with acknowledging it. I don't think there's anything wrong with you noticing that selfishly you do like it a little better this way. I mean, I think that it's a perfectly human reaction to have. It doesn't mean you're wishing the virus on people or you're wishing harm to people. You're just acknowledging that there are certain things about the way things are right now that you kind of like better. It's a shame that you can't have that level of comfort and that level of satisfaction in your life ordinarily. I mean, I wish that you could have that more often. I wish that we could all have that more often in whatever way we desire it, But no, I don't think there's anything, I don't think there's anything wrong with noticing that or acknowledging it at all. But yeah, I'm really happy that you were with us in the call, and hopefully you can join us again in the future because it was a lot of fun. Sean Hartley, aha! Finally, I have posted my question 2 full days ahead of the stream. I have become the ultimate. Anyway, I hope you and everyone else here is keeping well. My question, Picard spoilers for those who have not seen it. Beyond the fact that there is the everlasting question about whether the transporter is a murder machine, is Picard actually dead now? And if so, who and what is the wonderful monstrosity we will be following into season 2? Did they bury his original body? If not, where is it? And are they doing a hilarious Star Trek version of Weekend at Bernie's? Did the scan of his brain also include his time as Locutus? Does it mean he now has access to every memory he ever formed? Tell me, CBS, tell me. Thanks. Well, I think the answer to the first question of is Picard dead or not? I think the answer is no. I think and I mentioned this in my review video, which I guess I had not put up when you posted your question, or maybe you haven't watched it yet. I think there is enough in the actual episode for us to conclude that the Picard that we see at the very end of the episode is the real Picard. It is not a copy of Picard with Picard's memories. It is not analogous to a clone that thinks he is the real guy, but actually is a copy. I think we can safely conclude, based on the scene with Data, based on how they talk about him after he wakes up, and also based on things that the producers have said about their intentions for that story, that it is literally the same Picard, that his consciousness was transplanted somehow into the golem. And we can have metaphysical arguments about that, whether or not that sort of thing is possible in real life, et cetera, and those will be a lot of fun. But in terms of the reality of the show, I think it is fairly unequivocal that for the purposes of the reality of the show, that is literally the same Picard. Picard is not dead. His consciousness has simply been transferred into another vessel. But as to your other questions, those are really interesting questions that I am curious whether the show will address them or whether they will just let them be and move ahead with a completely different story for season 2. What did they do with Picard's original body? Yeah, did they bury it? Where is it buried? How is this news broached to the public? Will it be widely known that Picard is in a new body or not? Will the death of Picard's original body be kept completely secret, or will there be sort of like a grave site of Picard's original body for people to go to? How does the brain work? Will he have total recall of all of his memories like Data had, and I think Soji seemed to have after she woke up? Or will they just sort of ignore that? Those are really interesting questions that I guess we'll have to wait and see if they actually address on the show. But the big question of is it still Picard? I think the answer is yes. And whether or not you think that's possible, whether or not you think that makes sense, these are arguments we can have. But for the purposes of the fiction of the show, I think the answer is unequivocally yes, it is the same Picard. Neo-normie UPS man of the apocalypse. Do you think that people defending Biden's groping and claims of rape are really showing hypocrisy, considering people like Sargon of Akkad used the same rhetoric in 2016 on the multiple sexual abuses of Donald Trump. I find you can argue lesser of two evils on policy, but when the Democratic candidate is basically Donald Trump, then isn't it just being cynical and really ultimately pointless who is in the White House? Well, but then you're pretending the policy just doesn't matter. And as I said earlier to when it was brought up in a previous question, I mean, if this is going to be the situation, this situation sucks. Forcing people to choose between the lesser of two rapists is not where we need to be. And we can make arguments and say, well, you know, Biden hasn't been accused by as many people as Trump has. What Biden is accused of doing isn't as bad as what Trump is accused of doing. And then you fall into this trap of where you're ranking people's suffering. You're saying, well, the person that you know, Biden's accuser doesn't have it as bad as Trump's accusers had it, or it's not as cumulatively bad because there's only one over here and there are dozens over here. That's just a really gross place to be. And we should not have to do that in order to choose who the president is. But you know, policy does matter. And on matters of policy, it's not even an argument that Biden would be a better president than Trump. And that's why I think it's important to that as much as it sucks and as shitty as the situation is, that you have to hold your nose and vote for the lesser of two evils. Even if both candidates are accused of doing the same inexcusable evil, even if they're both accused of doing the exact same crime. You know, if the end result will be, look, one of these two people is going to be the leader of this country, and there's nothing you can do to prevent that outcome. Like, one of these two guys is going to be the president the day after Election Day, or the president-elect, I guess, the day after Election Day, and then you have to vote for the lesser of two evils. I mean, and that sucks, but that's the situation. You know, so, but it's as I've said before. But yes, it is. I do, to answer the earlier what you said in the question, it is hypocritical for people to pretend that Biden's accusations don't matter. They do matter. They should be taken seriously. His accuser should be believed until there is a compelling reason to not believe her. And you know, we should not assume that such a reason is forthcoming. Right? We should not just be waiting for her to be discredited, because that's kind of, then you're not really believing her, right? But yeah, so no, people who are pretending like Biden's accusations are completely unimportant. Yes, that is a little hypocritical. They are important. They do matter. We should take them very seriously. We should acknowledge the situation that they place us in as voters. Very much so. Next question is from Francois Lacombe. I forgot to ask, did Jeff survive? Referring, of course, to the little podcast short that we did last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess now, in preparation for the season premiere of the Ensign's Log. We did a little skit. Me and Jason did a little skit. Francois, I hate to tell you this, but I'm afraid that Jeff is with the angels. I'm sorry, Francois, but no, Jeff didn't make it. Next question from John Burnsy. Hi. So with the whole COVID-19 thing now having transferred to the airborne variety, did you manage to get to see that History Bites episode I posted from last week? But the big question I have is it that much of a surprise that, considering how contagions spring up in higher population density areas over lower population density ones, that New York ended up getting hammered? It's a wheel city for goods and services distribution, plus a large air and sea importing area, plus one of the biggest cities in population in the world in really a pretty small area. In Alberta, the province in which I live, during the Depression, the government raised a bill in the provincial legislature which prevented banks from seizing farms in lieu of loans and mortgage payments. Alberta didn't first strike oil until after World War II, and the legislation wasn't found unconstitutional until 1949, long after the Depression had been at its worst. But back then, farms were also many residences for many people. Now, the major banks in Canada are allowing many to skip mortgage payments, and Alberta has instructed that if no one is doing damage to rental properties, you can't incur penalties for late rent. And some are instructed to have rental holidays, as it looks like this will perhaps be upwards of a year. Anything like this happening in areas in the U.S. that you are aware of? 1 week to Good Friday. Yeah, boy, it won't be so good for a lot of people, unfortunately. Nothing like that is happening in any kind of a large scale. Actually, as some random geek mentioned in his question earlier, unbelievably, there are some realty companies that sent out notices to their tenants saying the opposite of a rent holiday. They were saying, oh, make sure you pay your rent early if you're afraid you might get laid off from work and you won't be able to pay your rent for the next couple months. We would hate to throw you guys out of your homes, so make sure you pay your rent up early, right? So I'm not, I mean, there are some areas, obviously there are some landlords who are taking it upon themselves to say, don't worry about the rent, you know? But in terms of like a broad program saying, you know, there is a rent holiday or you cannot throw people out, not really. I know I'm aware of some local or maybe state level judges around the country who have said for their district, and I think local police departments as well, who have said like, we will not be enforcing eviction orders until this is over. So, I mean, on the small scale, there are things like that are happening, but it's very piecemeal. There has not been any sort of broad, you know, like federal or even, I think, statewide response where the president or a governor has said, you know, rent payments and mortgage payments are suspended and nobody's getting kicked out of their house until this is over. But that would be nice. That would be nice. John Gingras. Hi, Steve. I hope you and your family are keeping safe and healthy. My question is, who is the better engineer for their time period amongst these fine folks? Charles Tripp Tucker III, Jet Reno, Montgomery Scott, Geordie LaForge, Miles O'Brien, Belana Torres, Ian, the emergency engineering hologram aboard La Serena. Well, we don't really know a whole lot about Ian, so it's kind of hard to vote for him. But I mean, it's hard to vote against Scotty, you know, like how do you vote against Scotty? I feel like the answer almost always has to be Scotty because he's the original miracle worker. Geordie's good. Tripp is good. Like Tripp is really good. And Tripp is sort of canonically the original, I guess, because he is set, you know, before the others. But, I mean, O'Brien, but I think I got to go with Scotty. I think if I had to pick who is the great miracle worker, who's the great engineer of all the Star Trek engineers, I got to go with Scotty, I think. Yeah. You know, he's the template. He is the engineer to which all other engineers aspire. Next question from Tom McDonald. So, Steve, when you have to shave your beard so you can wear a respirator mask correctly, which of the styles in the linked CDC article's infographic will you use and why? By the way, I found a couple of old N95 masks I bought for flint napping to protect my lungs from silicosis, actually. So I shaved my beard and left my mustache in a painter's brush. I think I look suave. Like a 70s porn star. Yeah, I thought you looked great in that picture you posted. I guess it was on Facebook, Tom. I thought you looked terrific. I guess I would go with like, maybe I would try for like a Magnum. I'd go for like a mustache if I had to. I would try to emulate Magnum, you know, so he would still have skin for the mask to kind of cling to and it wouldn't do my beard. I guess I would have to do that. I'd have to go for a Magnum. And I would not be happy because I would grow the beard back as soon as I possibly could. But I guess maybe I'd stick with the Magnum for a while, you know. Why not? Why the fuck not? I'm watching Magnum on Amazon Prime anyway. I'm in a very, very heavy Magnum phase. So if it comes to that and I have to do something to the facial hair, I'll go for the Magnum, right? And at least you all watching my videos will get some entertainment out of it, right? You could be, oh, look at the guy with the mustache. You'd like that, wouldn't you? Next question from Matthew Datcher. Actually, this is the final question of the patron questions. Matthew says, Steve, sorry for the 3-part question. Has Hogan's stay-at-home order given you any more free time? If so, are you filling any of that free time with film or television viewing? How are you deciding what to watch? I ask because I've been working my way through the various AFI lists. I completed both the original 100 Years, 100 Movies and its 10th anniversary version a while ago. Now I'm about 2/3 of the way through the 10 top 10 list with plans to complete the remaining lists when I'm finished with this one. Well, and he means the Hogan he is referring to is the mayor or the mayor, the mayor of Maryland, the governor of Maryland, Governor Hogan, not Hulk Hogan. Not, what you gonna do, brother? You're gonna stay at home. You're gonna socially distance, dude. Not that Hogan. The governor of the state of Maryland, Larry Hogan. And no, I feel bad for saying this, but my lifestyle has not really been all that affected because I always worked from home. My YouTube workload is the same as it was before, so I don't really have that much more free time than I had before all this. And the free time that I do have, if I have more free time than I had before, Ashley and I will probably go for a walk. We'll try to get out of the house in a safe way, as much as possible, and go for a walk, away from other people so we can get some fresh air and get some exercise. So no, I haven't really been watching that much more TV. I mentioned just in the last question, we're watching Magnum PI on Amazon Prime, which is a blast. It's such a great show, and I remember it from when I was a kid, but I haven't gone through and watched it as an adult from start to finish. So that's a ton of fun. I love Magnum. We're watching a documentary on Netflix. We're halfway through How to Fix a Drug Scandal, which is pretty interesting. It feels a little padded. It's 4 episodes, and 2 episodes in, it feels like they probably could have done it in 2 episodes instead of 4, but they're kind of stretching it out a little, which seems to be a fault in a lot of Netflix series, especially a lot of Netflix documentary series. But it's really good. It's really interesting. And I think Ashley chose that one. She just thought it looked interesting, so we watched it. So, unfortunately, no, I haven't really been watching more TV or more movies than I ordinarily would. And I haven't really been doing anything special to choose what we watch. So, sorry. Good question, though. I'm glad that you have been able to find something. So, let me turn on the live chat viewer. There it is. And look how tiny that print is. My goodness, I'm gonna have to make that a little larger so people can see that here. Let me try this. There we go. Now people could actually read it if they're watching the video. And this, you see how I do this on the air, how professional I am? And we'll just see what people are saying in the live chat. So now that the official patron question period is over, let's see what everybody thinks in the live chat. And let me check and make sure I didn't miss anything. No, good, okay. So yeah, here's and apologies in advance if I missed your question, because the chat goes by fast and I don't always see everybody's question. Hi, Leto. 255 AD says, question, is stopping the virus worth maybe giving our government dictatorial powers? That was the point of my Patreon question. In the long term, obviously, it would be very unfortunate if the government took this opportunity to seize dictatorial powers. So, maybe, I don't know. It depends on how many people you expect to die from the virus. And it's really an impossible question because you don't know what's going to happen. If you knew what was going to happen, then you could answer it easily. But obviously, I don't want to see the government take dictatorial power, especially as a result of a pandemic. A couple of super chats just came in. Here's one from Twilord on lesser evils. If Quinn said 100% honestly, it'd save lives. No wars, healthcare, ends oligarchy. Could you start a violent revolution? If not, is it moral to judge people not voting Joe? If a violent revolution would save lives, if I could know 100% certainly that a violent revolution would save more lives than not having a violent revolution, then yes, I suppose it would be moral to start a violent revolution. If you could know ahead of time that would be the result, yes. Yeah, and if not, is it moral to judge people not voting Joe? The not voting Joe thing is complicated. Like some random geek has pointed out, if you in a state that is probably going to go for the Democratic nominee anyway. It is not that big of a deal if you don't vote for Biden in the general, but generally speaking, I really wish people would vote for the Democratic nominee, even if it's someone that you are not a huge fan of. And also a super chat I just got from David Colby. Thank you, David. So school's out forever. School's been blown to pieces. My day job, being a crossing guard, has been put off until next year, roughly. What should I do with my free time? You know what you should do? You should take up writing. I think you might be good at that. You should maybe give writing a try. Oh, Radical Bacon, is Ashley around more? No, Ashley worked from home too. So our life has literally changed very, very little as a result of this. Yeah. Let me see. I saw another question here from... Oh, Red Spiral Ray, what kind of microphone do I use? And some random geek answered it already. Yeah, it is a Blue Yeti, and it is a very nice USB microphone. If you're going to use a USB microphone, I would recommend it very, very highly. Oh, Twilord, would I personally start a violent revolution? I don't know. I mean, I from the premise of your question, I accept that it would be the right thing to do. Would I personally start a violent revolution? I mean, I guess I could if I had certain knowledge that it would be the best thing. But it's very difficult to imagine from where I'm sitting now. But if I could be vouchsafed that certain knowledge that I would definitely be doing the greater good, then I guess it would be a lot easier. Yeah. And Leto, thoughts on Biden being a rapist piece of shite? Yeah, I dearly, dearly wish that me and my fellow American voters were not in the position of having to choose the lesser of two rapists. Like that is, and you know, if anything, it gives me another incentive to vote for Sanders if he is still running when my state holds its primary. But I mean, if Biden is still the nominee in November, I've got to vote for him. But it fucking sucks. It fucking sucks. And people should not be ignoring it. People should not be dismissing it or pretending that it doesn't matter. Here's a super chat from JT. Why do you think DS9 took a more egalitarian stance toward religion than TNG and TOS? Well, that's a good question. I think because maybe the writers of Deep Space Nine thought that there were things about religion and the way people engage with religious belief that they had to say or that they wanted to explore in their show that TNG and TOS never really explored because no central characters in those shows really seemed to have closely felt religious beliefs or seem to engage with religion in any meaningful way. So having Sisko be the emissary of the Bajoran religion and having him gradually sort of acquire an appreciation for that religion and also having Kira be a devotee of that religion, it opened up new story possibilities for DS9. So I think it's a matter of the writers just wanting to include that element in their show so that they could write stories about that as well as everything else. 255 AD says, you should do an episode where the cat bartender in your show wants to go vegan, but can't because she's an obligate carnivore. That is a really funny idea. Thank you for that suggestion. That's a really funny idea. Oh, hi, Marty. Oh, Der Alte Trekkie, old Magnum or new Magnum? Same goes for old MacGyver or new MacGyver. I have not seen any of new Magnum, so I don't know if it's any good or not, but I'm obviously watching old Magnum, classic Tom Selleck Magnum on Amazon Prime, and I think I only saw the first 2 or 3 episodes of new MacGyver, and then I didn't watch any more of it, so obviously I would say old MacGyver as well. New MacGyver seemed okay. Like, I didn't hate it. I wasn't like, oh, not my MacGyver, right? But it didn't interest me enough to make me want to keep watching it. I've toyed with the idea of maybe going back to it, just checking it out to see if I like it a little more now that it has a couple of seasons under its belt. But old MacGyver for me. Yeah. Francois Lacombe, why do you have a Picard action figure instead of a Riker one? Well, because because Riker and I look a little bit alike, and it would be weird. Here, I'll show you. I do have a Riker action figure, of course, and of course it is within arm's reach of where I'm sitting to do the show. So here's Riker. So we'll swap out Jean-Luc for Riker here. So sorry, Jean-Luc, just take a powder there, bud. I'll put Jean-Luc right there, and here's Will. Put him on the mic, there we go, and turn him toward the camera and tilt him up so he's looking. See, this is what you have to do here. Okay, this is the way this works. So yeah, stand Jean-Luc over there. Yeah, there. See, doesn't it look kind of weird? It's like guy with a beard, guy with a beard. But there you go. Oh, and another super chat from JT. Thank you for the super chat. Last question. Why did the writers of Enterprise decide to hate on Vulcans so much? I don't know if they hated on Vulcans. I think they just wanted to do something a little different. They wanted to introduce a group that would be antagonistic, but also not be enemies, which is sort of how Vulcans were written on Enterprise, where they were sort of the patrician, group that was kind of overlooking humanity and from the perspective of some of the characters sort of holding humanity back or looking over humanity's shoulder. And I think they just wanted to find a new angle on Vulcans. And I think it was an interesting angle. Like whether or not you think that it was completely successful, I think... Twilord, you're another super chat from Twilord. This is an apology for the heavy question. Please, no apology necessary, but thank you for your generosity. I think they just wanted a different angle on how to write Vulcans. And like I say, I think it was an interesting idea, whether you think that they pulled it off or not. Yes, Riker is a fuckboy. I've heard that from someone. Andrew Michael says, thought you should know, Steve, your littlest fan saw Riker on TNG and said the lovely swearing man isn't wearing his hat. That is the best compliment I have ever gotten. Okay, and Marty also says, LOL, he needs a Steve hat. Just let me drop this on you, okay? Let me drop this on you. And obviously, those of you who read those Star Trek photo comics that I do, and I post them in the YouTube community feed, and also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and stuff. I do photo comics of these guys with the Star Trek action figures, and one of the characters in those photo comics is Thomas Riker, who is, of course, Will Riker's transporter clone. Or I guess they are sort of transporter clones, transporter duplicates of each other. And when Thomas Riker came aboard the Enterprise in my comic, I gave him a wardrobe change. So this here is Thomas Riker. And you may notice a resemblance between the two of us. So Thomas Riker does have a little hat. And he does have a shirt and a pair of jeans, and that's Thomas Riker. So yeah, so I do have a Riker with a Steve hat. I mean, I need to get like a sticker or print something out or paint like some semblance of a Suns logo on there to complete the illusion. I don't know why Thomas Riker would be a fan of the Hagerstown Suns when the sport of baseball really does not exist in any organized way in the 24th century, outside of a few colonies, as we saw from Deep Space Nine. But yeah, that's Tom Riker. And some random geek says, tell everyone to sub to the Tea Party hosted by Marty Abernathy. Party hardy with Marty. Yes, absolutely. There's the link in the description, and check out Marty's show. Absolutely. I remember when Marty, I think, messaged me a little while ago to talk about thinking about starting it. So yeah, everybody go subscribe. Der Alte Trekkie says, why is it so hard for the left party to get traction, at least in Germany? Why are the idiots always saying, yeah, look at the GDR, how well that worked? And then there's a second part of it posted a little later that says, why are there no left-leaning parties in the U.S. that are getting traction? I think A lot of that is due to the fact that the right, the conservatives have just, I don't know how it is in Germany. I have no expertise to comment on that at all. But here in the United States, a lot of it is because the left-leaning parties, like the Democrats, the party that is theoretically the more progressive left-leaning party, have so allowed the Republicans and the conservatives to control the conversation, to the point where we have someone like Bernie Sanders running for president, who is by no stretch of the imagination a radical or a revolutionary. But his proposals are being spoken of as though they are radical revolutionary proposals. And he's talking about stuff that most of the rest of the world already has in some form, especially in terms of universal health care. Like, this is not a radical thing. The National Health Service in the United Kingdom dates back to the 1940s. This is not a radical thing. And yet, because the right has so dominated the political discourse in this country, it is thought of as a radical thing. So what chance do people who are even further to the left than that have of gaining traction in that environment? I think that is a lot of the problem. Super chat from TARDIS Fanboy. Hey, Steve, have you ever tried Second Life? I'm building a full-scale space station there. You can check it out on Facebook, San Francisco Station. I have never, ever played Second Life, so I can't tell you anything there. But good luck with your space station. Matthew saying, I just retconned the transporter accident to be far worse than we remembered. What's that supposed to mean, man? What are you talking about? Look at him. He's cool. He's a cool guy. What are you talking about? Look, he's happy. And for those of you who don't follow my comics, he works at 10 Forward. He wanted to keep busy while he was living on the Enterprise with his buddy, with his brother, Will, and he wanted to contribute to the ship, even though he's no longer in Starfleet, because of course, he went to prison in Deep Space Nine. Now that he's out of prison, he works as a bartender for Guinan at 10 Forward. So he's doing great. He's living his best life. What are you talking about? Transporter accident was worse than we thought. Man, that's just not. It's a very unkind thing to say, Matthew. It's a very unkind thing to say. Yes, thank you, Andrew. Steve doesn't look like Riker. Riker looks like Steve. Thank you very much. Again, what a beautiful compliment. What a beautiful compliment. Yeah, Francois says the left can't gain traction because the oligarchs won't allow it to. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that as well. There is an entrenched sort of political class that benefit from discouraging people from being more accepting of more progressive ideas. I think that's absolutely right. Red Spiral Ray says, hey, Steve, in Man of Steel, people had a major issue with Superman killing Zod, saying it was out of character, but he does the same in Superman 2. What's the difference? Okay, there are a few differences. First of all, the tone of Superman 2 is a lot lighter. It's much more of an adventure movie. The death of Zod is not lingered on, is not presented in any kind of graphic way, and in fact is mostly just implied. Superman tosses Zod into that sort of chasm in the Fortress of Solitude, and we don't see him anymore. And actually, in an extended cut of the film, you see that Zod is being led out of the Fortress of Solitude in handcuffs. He's been arrested. So there is a version of the film where he doesn't kill Zod, where Zod actually survives, and he's arrested because he loses his powers when they do the switcheroo with the red, the beams from the red Krypton sun that takes away their powers while Superman is protected in the chamber. So you could argue that he doesn't actually kill Zod, but even if you assume that he does, it's done in a very, very lighthearted way. It's off camera. It's not lingered on, and it is not presented as like, well, it's what he had to do. And the thing about Man of Steel that really bothered me was we see this over the top destructive violence that Superman is a willing participant in. He doesn't seem to care about saving people at all, really. And then it ends with this very grim, gruesome act of snapping his his foe's neck when he didn't really have to. It seemed like gratuitous. And that is the big difference. There's a major difference in tone and the way it was presented. And the particular take on the Superman character that a lot of people just did not find very appealing, myself included. Lord Javi131 said, and then it just scrolled up on me, said, have you heard of the board game Star Trek Ascendancy? Very cool game. Look it up. I have not seen that board game. Sorry. Skelloween says, Steve, you're rad. I remember finding you because of Star Trek, and I was so happy you were also a decent guy. I am isolating out in a shed right now, even though I rent a room in a flat in town. Well, that's very, very nice of you. Thank you for saying that, and thank you for isolating yourself. That's really cool. Ryan Lohman, I wonder what happened between Seven and Chakotay. Do you think it will be explained in season 2 of Picard? Maybe, but I mean, what does it take? Like, it's 18 years later. They broke up. Like, what did they bond for life? It's 18 years later. They went out for a while. They had a good time. They weren't really compatible. Life goes on. They broke up. They went their separate ways. They're all to Trekkie, and I have to say, I don't get it. Even Germany has something like a healthcare system. Fracking Germany, not the most progressive of countries of the world. Yeah, the healthcare thing with the United States, it's like America is the #1 country. There's nothing we can't do. We are the best. We are the indispensable nation. Can't give our people healthcare. Sorry, that's too much. Like, it makes no sense. It is completely contrary to the national image that we are constantly feeding ourselves. How can it be simultaneously true that America is the indispensable nation, America is the most powerful, wealthiest, greatest country on the face of the earth, but we just can't afford to give people health care? It makes no sense. It makes no sense. But there are millions of people who are totally convinced that it is a pie-in-the-sky idea for the United States, the greatest nation on earth, to enact some kind of universal health care, even though dozens of other countries with far less wealth and far less influence and far less resources and far fewer advantages than we have been able to do it. It's ridiculous. Eddie Stone says, Steve, I first discovered you through your Atheist Read series, but obviously I love all your content. Well, thank you. I know that series is gone, but do you ever think about revisiting atheist issues in the future? Yeah, of course. I've done videos here and there that have touched on atheist issues since then. I've done the Why Did I Watch This Movie reviews, which I've kind of gotten away from recently, but I might do some more of those at some point where it's me watching Christian movies and kind of reviewing them. And that's not totally, like, it's not all atheist stuff. I'm reviewing the movies, so I'm reviewing them as films as well as reviewing their religious content. So it's not strictly atheist stuff, but it's from an atheist perspective. And of course, Michael Whirly, the Whirlpool videos are very much, at least in part, there's political critique there as well, but there's also religious critique. So I'm still kind of doing a little bit, but not in the same way as with Atheist Reads. And I don't know if I can come up with an idea for a good video that I think would make like a really good essay, about some topic from an atheist perspective. Of course I would do it. Oh, excuse me. But no specific plans right now. Oh, some random geek. Yes, union busting has hurt the progressive movement and the left-wing movement as well. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a great point. The decline in influence of labor unions has been devastating in a lot of ways. I agree with that very much. Another one from Twilor, another super chat from Twilor. Thank you very much. We're stuck in a world where any decent human left-leaning ally is valuable regardless of what they think of Voyager. I have to show you mercy if they... Thank you. I appreciate that. Here's another super chat just came in from John Gingras. Thank you for your generosity as well. Do you think with all that has been happening, we might be able to finally convince the FCC that internet access is a necessary utility now? You know what? If we get a Democratic presidential administration starting next year, and that is not something that happens during the first term of that president, I will be very disappointed. I feel like Obama was kind of slowly moving in that direction. And if we had had if Hillary Clinton had won the election instead of Donald Trump, or especially I think if Bernie Sanders had been the nominee and had won instead of Donald Trump, I would like to think we would be, if not there already, we would at least have been moved a hell of a lot closer to that than we are now. And I support that completely. Yannick Muller says, hey, Steve, are you and Audie planning on watching Cats? It's terrible, and I highly recommend it. If I watch it, Audie will watch it, because she's usually on the couch with us when we watch movies. But yeah, I don't have any specific plans to watch it, but it could happen. It could happen, yeah. Oh, Radical Bacon, what a great question. Would you piss, shit, or just spit on Trump's grave? I feel like I'd have to piss, at least. I don't think I would shit. I'm not really a public shitter. I don't think I would shit on his grave. And plus, why fertilize it? But piss on it? Oh, yeah. Oh, I would piss all over it. I'd piss on the headstone. I'd piss on the grass. I would piss all over Trump's grave. I'd piss on it until the Secret Service dragged me away. I would piss on it until my bladder was empty of piss. I would piss on his grave, baby. I would piss the fuck on his... Oh, God, I would piss on Trump's grave, yeah. I might spit on it too, but that would be in addition to all the pissing I would do. Juv or Hoove, I apologize for mispronouncing it. Question, are you involved in any tabletop games? No, I don't play tabletop games. I'm really not into RPGs, be they tabletop or online. This is not my thing. Silent Snooper says, hi, Steve. Love your Star Trek content. Thank you for working hard on it. I enjoy listening to the videos while playing video games or walking to or from work. Well, thank you very much. That's very nice. I appreciate being appreciated. That's really cool. 255 AD says, I've been really hard on leftists who won't vote for a centrist. I don't think I could bring myself to treat anti-rapists the same way. Yeah, I see what you're saying. The allegations against Biden do make it a lot more difficult to vote for him. Like, and if someone came to me and said, I just can't bring myself to vote for someone who I know has been credibly accused of sexually assaulting someone, like, I'm not gonna, I am in no position as someone I'm not a survivor. I have never been through that. And if someone came, whether the person saying it was a survivor or not, if they just came to me and said, I feel very strongly about this and I will not under any circumstances vote for someone who has been accused of something like that, like, it's not for me to tell them that they're wrong. It's not for me to try to argue them out of it. Like, I agree with you. I'm a lot more sympathetic to that position. I saw a question up here. Red Spiral Ray says, do you think the lieutenant governor of Texas will be voted out of office for saying old people should gladly die to boost the economy? Lots of decent old folks probably disagree. It's Texas. I'm not saying that all the old folks in Texas are indecent, but it's Texas. Like, I'm sure lots of Republicans will completely not identify themselves as being in the vulnerable group and will say, yeah, he's talking sense, vote for him. So, no, I don't know. Malvolio says, hey, Steve, what do you think of the fan-produced Trek episodes available on YouTube? I was a huge fan of Star Trek Continues, and which is why, like, the allegations, the conduct that Vic Mignogna, who is the creator and star of Star Trek Continues, has been accused of being, like, inappropriate with people at conventions, is, like, super disappointing and frustrating for me, because I love Star Trek Continues. I think it is one of the best fan series of anything I've ever seen. So I was a huge fan of Star Trek Continues. I watched Star Trek Hidden Frontier back in the day. I don't think I've watched every episode of that, but I watched a good bit of that, and that was fun. Star Trek New Voyages was fun. So I've seen a lot of the Star Trek fan content, and some of it is really good. Like the New Voyages episodes that guest starred Walter Koenig and the one that guest starred George Takei, like, they were really good. They were really good episodes. And I think I liked almost every episode of Star Trek Continues. I thought Star Trek Continues was fantastic. Dear Alta Trekkies, so maybe one should vote for the third party. There is a third party, right? It's not just that well known. Yeah, there is. There are third parties, but to say that they are not well known is a bit of an understatement. Yeah. There are third parties in the sense that they exist and they have utterly no chance at all of winning a presidential election in anywhere close to the near future. Francois Lacombe, how would the Klingons handle the COVID-19 pandemic? They would identify the people who were infected and they would either forcibly quarantine them or maybe even kill them. That's what the Klingons would do. A super chat from Chris Peace. Thank you, Chris. Do you think that a Democrat would reenact the fairness doctrine in the FCC? There has not been much of a push for that, but it's possible. Yeah, I wouldn't mind that either. Frankly, I think the fairness doctrine is not a terrible idea. It would certainly counteract a lot of the right-wing propaganda we see from talk radio and things like Fox News for sure. Would they? I don't know, but I would like to think so. And another one from Twilord. Thank you again. I've never been a true victim, but I was unknowingly groomed into a tool by an abuser. Was trying to help vulnerable people. He used those resources to target them. Broke me for half a decade. I am so sorry to hear that. That's awful. That's terrible. And I hope you're okay as far as that goes now. David Colby says, the video game I'm playing is being utterly infuriating. Shake your fist at it, please, and proclaim the designers of Battle Brothers to be scoundrels. Okay. Battle Brothers! You scoundrels! How dare you! How dare you design such an infuriating game for my friend David! Damn you! Damn you to hell! Oh, God. Damn you to hell. Is that okay? Is that good? Is that what you needed? The line must be drawn here. How about that? Is that bonus Picard? Bonus Picard. That was actually not a bad Patrick Stewart. I wish Dana was here so she could hear my much improved Patrick Stewart impression. I'll make a clip and play it for her. Oh, are you leaving, Lato? Good night, Lato. Radical Bacon says, I'm trying to get a cat to cuddle with me. This cat doesn't like tuna. What do I do? You find what the cat likes, whatever it is, and then you give the cat what it wants. That's the solution to all cat-related problems I have found. Just fucking give the cat what it wants. Some random geek, how often would you like to come onto Social Justice Alchemy? Every 3 months? Every 2 months? We can do every 3 months. That seems reasonable. Quarterly seems like would be reasonable. Der Alte Trekkie, ever played Star Trek Voyager Elite Force? No. I have played Star Trek Bridge Commander a bunch of times, but I've never played Voyager Elite Force. Some random geek, are you a ham? What the fuck do you think, man? Am I a ham? Am I a ham? He asks. Am I a ham? Yes. I am a gigantic honey baked ham. Twilord, another super chat. They did exploit me for over €1,000, so taking some comfort in the fact I was damaged for my failure to see the truth. Wow, that's jeez. I'm really sorry to hear that. David Colby, yes, actually, that was very cathartic. Also, I had just watched First Contact last night. You did a good reading. Well, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. Absolutely. That's First Contact is one of the. It's definitely the best next gen movie and one of the best Star Trek movies just in general. Yeah, for sure, for sure. They invade our space and we fall back. They assimilate entire worlds and we fall back. The line must be drawn here. I gotta turn him around. Here, this far, no farther, and I will make them pay for what they've done. There you go. A dramatic reading of Patrick Stewart's big hammy scene in First Contact. Some random gig. Have you done theater or stage plays before? No, I took some theater courses in college, but I never actually have performed on stage. Radical Bacon, Steve, do you cut your own hair? Have you tried buying a set of hair clippers online lately? I have a pair of. I do cut my own hair because I wear a hat most of the time. See, you can tell it's a home project. I just try to keep it short. Yeah, I do cut my own hair, and I wear a hat most of the time, so I don't give a shit. And the clippers I use, I've had for years, so I've never had to buy clippers online recently. So is it troubling? Is it difficult? I have no idea. Deralte Trekkie says that sounded more like Optimus Prime in the beginning. I don't really have an Optimus Prime, so if that sounded like Optimus Prime, then I'll take that as a compliment. Because I really don't, as far as I know, like I don't have an Optimus Prime. 255 AD says, do you disagree with what I said about eco-fascism being inevitable if we let government get too much power? No, I think I agree with you. And yeah, I know. I think I agree with you. I mean, I'm not. I think that is something that we have to worry about. I'm not in favor of government gaining, dictatorial powers for any reason. I think eco-fascism is something that would definitely be a concern. Is it inevitable? I guess maybe. I don't know. Clippers are out of stock in a lot. Really, I didn't know that. I guess because people are cutting their hair to counteract contracting the virus. I never thought about that. Wow. Yeah, that sucks. That's yet another iteration where another thing where it makes things a lot worse, isn't it? Radical Bacon. If you're a ham, how can you be a vegetarian? I'm a ham, but I'm actually made of pea protein. PEA protein. Pea protein. So I'm a vegan ham. Does that even exist? Do they even have vegan ham? They should. They really should. I want some vegan bean soup with some vegan ham. Deralte Trekkie, what would you have done differently concerning Star Trek Picard? I would have either cut down the number of episodes and told the same story with fewer episodes, or I would have asked for a few more episodes and expanded on a few plot lines that they didn't really have time to expand on. Like, for instance, the Borg stuff, specifically the ex-Borg stuff, had a lot that seemed like it was very, very rich ground for storytelling that they just didn't have the time or the interest to go into too much. So yeah, I feel like to me, the major flaw of the series was the pacing, and the pacing could be fixed by either telling the same basic story, but just doing it in fewer episodes so it doesn't drag as much, or getting more episodes and filling it out a little bit more than it was. But that's what I would do. I would do something to address the pacing issue, because that was the big problem I had with it. Ryan Lohman says, it's going to be a while before movies resume. Do you think they'll make another Star Trek film with Chris Pine, or are they going to go in the further future with Patrick Stewart again? I don't know. I mean, I know that there's another version of Star Trek 4 in development, or at least there was before all this happened. But they were very sort of cagey about whether it would be a continuation of the Kelvin series or whether it would be something new. They seem to be sort of implying that it would not be a Chris Pine movie without actually coming out and saying that. But I mean, personally, I would love to see another Chris Pine movie, because I thought the Kelvin movies were terrific. But we'll see. I mean, at this point, I'll be happy if we just get another movie in the next 3 or 4 years. Deralte Trekkie, would you still have killed off Icheb, Maddox, Hugh, Data, and Picard? I would. Icheb, I could go either way on. I mean, I'm not. The death of Icheb didn't bother me all that much. I probably would not have killed Maddox or Hugh. But then, I would have had to find something else for Maddox to do in the story. That's the problem. If I could come up with something for Maddox to do in the story after the point where he would have been killed off, then no, I wouldn't have killed Maddox either. But if I couldn't have thought of anything, I mean, why not kill the fucking guy? I probably, and like I said in my review, I probably would not have done the same thing. I would not have done the same thing with Picard that they did either. I would have used the magic android multi-tool to fix his brain instead of doing what they actually did in the series. 255 AD says, why do you have vegan cheat days? I mean, it's not like you give yourself cheat days on other moral beliefs. How do you know? No, you're right. I don't. Part of it, honestly, and this doesn't reflect very well on me ethically, but part of it is convenience. You know, it's easier for me and my wife to sort of take a break for one meal a week and not do something vegetarian. But I mean, I don't recommend it, and I don't try to argue that it's like, you know, it's what everybody should do, but it's what I do. You know. Caroline Clark, do you think the Quentin Tarantino version of Star Trek will ever be made? I don't know. I mean, it looked like it was increasingly unlikely before all this happened. So I get the feeling when when the pandemic is over and Hollywood is ready to start ramping up production again, I feel like it will probably, maybe the studios will be taking a look at projects that are kind of in the hopper and be like, do we really want to do that? Do we really want to do that? Is that a good investment? And I feel like maybe the Tarantino Star Trek might end up going away. Especially since it was starting to look like Tarantino wasn't going to direct it anyway. He was kind of hinting that he wasn't going to direct it. And at that point, like, what's the draw? You know, a Star Trek movie based on a script written by a writer's room that was convened by Quentin Tarantino. Like, it loses a lot of its appeal if it's not going to be a Quentin Tarantino film. So I would not be surprised if it doesn't wind up happening at all. Duralte Trekkie says, or use nanoprobes. That would be the ultimate and bitter irony that he would have been saved by the Borg. Yeah, I mean, I would have fixed the brain thing somehow. I just wouldn't have done it the way they did it. Some random geek says, question, what meal do you have for your cheat meal? Well, it's different every week. So what we've been doing lately is just going and getting some fast food. I mean, it's nothing fancy. It's not like we cook like a fancy meal. Like I'll just go to Wendy's or Arby's or something and get a chicken sandwich. You know, or get like a beef burger instead of a Beyond Burger or an Impossible Burger, you know. But it's different every week. It's not the same thing every time. Question or a super chat from John Gingras. Thank you, John. I thought they'd use the Android device to heal Picard and that the new Android body would go to Data so that he could then look like old Brent Spiner. Yeah, that would have been fine. That would have been good. If Brent Spiner wanted to keep showing up on the show as Data, that would have been great. They could have gone that way, sure. Some random geek says, does Quentin Tarantino suck? As a person, he may. As a filmmaker, not at all. As a filmmaker, I think he's a genius. I think he's a fantastic writer and director. As a human being, not so much. He's been accused of some very, very shitty things on set. He was, let's just be charitable and say he was slow to condemn Harvey Weinstein. So as a person, I could have all kinds of problems with him. And he just seems like fucking annoying. He seems like the guy at the party that you would do anything to get away from. Like, he just seems like the most fucking annoying guy in any given room at any given time. But as an artist, as a filmmaker, I think he's brilliant. So no, he doesn't suck in that way. I don't think. Twilord says, I have cheat days for my anti-cannibalism stance. Well, good for you. I hope you keep getting away with that. Good for you. I hope the people you eat at least deserve it. Okay, I am going, if anybody has a few final questions, go ahead and get them in the chat, and if I see them, I will answer them. But in the meantime, I'm going to start wrapping this up. We've been going for an hour and 3/4, so I'm gonna bring this show to a close. And as always, if you asked a question in the live chat and I didn't answer it, I apologize. It's probably because I just didn't see it. I don't see everybody's questions because the chat goes fast sometimes, so it's nothing personal. I just didn't see your question. So here's one from 255 AD. And yes, some random geek. I will pitch the charity links in a second. Thank you for reminding me. 255 AD says, the teddy bear on your show, forgot his name, Jack. Is his mother dying just a throwaway gag, or will it come back later in the season? It's probably going to be just a throwaway gag. Duralte Trekkie says, but he looks like David Hewlett from Stargate Atlantis, so that's the something going on for him. Okay. Radical Bacon, do you think housing prices will depress? If they do, will you get a house? I'm probably getting a house no matter what. I think I don't want to say anything too definitive because it hasn't happened yet. And with all this going on, I'm not sure when it will happen, but we are almost definitely going to be looking into buying my grandmother's house in real life, just as I'm sort of setting that up in Steve and Stuffy. And that's actually going to happen in real life too, hopefully, fingers crossed. And we'll be buying that from the estate, like from my grandmother's estate. So hopefully it won't be the housing market will not be as relevant to that as it would be if we were buying a house in another situation. But yeah, we're probably going to be buying my granny's house in the next few months and moving there later this year anyway. So thank you. All right. So should we invest in stock while it's down? I mean, do you have money that you can do without for a while? I mean, that's always what I've been told. If you want to invest in the stock market, make sure you have a lot of money that you're not going to miss for a while. But I don't know. I don't invest in stocks. I'm not the person to ask. Caroline Clark, did you move into your grandma's house? No, not yet. No, this is, but possibly, hopefully later this year, we'll buy the house and move to Granny's house. Yes. And that will happen in Steve and Stuffy, and that will happen in real life too. So it'll be nice. It'll make sense. It'll match. Durante Trekkie, if they would do a Stargate Star Trek crossover, would you watch it? Yeah, sure, absolutely. Okay, so thank you for the questions. Thanks, everybody. I want to plug Social Justice Alchemy as requested by SRG. Watch Social Justice Alchemy every Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern on the Social Justice Alchemy YouTube channel. It's hosted by Some Random Geek and John Brockman, Tom McDonald, Jamie J. Phoenix, Jem, and Leto Anor. I was a guest on it a couple months ago now, and it was a lot of fun. It's a great show. Check it out. Also, charity links in the video description. Some charity links to help out some friends of ours who have crowdfunding sites or PayPal links who they just need a little help. They're in some financial distress, and if you can possibly afford to throw a few bucks their way, please do so. And if you can't, no shame in that, but maybe think about sharing their links on social media and getting the word out. And Durante Trekkie, thank you for your condolences on the loss of my granny. She did die in January. I talked about it a little bit at the time, and yeah, she and I were super close, and it was it was tough, and it's still tough, and I miss her a lot. But thank you for your condolences. And Radical Bacon, I will totally pet the cat for you. Absolutely. Reminder to those of you who enjoy what I do here on YouTube, you can support what I do on this channel on Patreon, patreon.com/Steve Shives. Being a patron at any level gives you the opportunity to submit questions for Ask Away ahead of time. Every Monday before I'm doing an Ask Away that week, I put up a special post on my Patreon feed that is patrons only, and anyone who is a patron can see it and leave a comment and ask a question for that week's Ask Away. So there you go. Patreon.com/Steve Shives if you want to support me and help me continue doing what I do. Also, the podcast. This is a big week for our podcasts. If you don't know, I co-host a couple of podcasts in the Let Me Listen podcast family. One of them is Late Seating, the movie review podcast. And the other one is the Star Trek themed improv comedy podcast, The Ensign's Log, which has its first episode of its third season up today. The third season of the Ensign's Log officially begins today, so if you haven't heard that one, go check it out. It is the Star Trek-themed comedy podcast where the brilliant and hilarious Jason Harding and I play low-ranking officers serving aboard a certain legendary Federation starship as it embarks on a certain historic 5-year mission. We are now in year 3 of the Ensign's Log, and it will be, of course, since all of our episodes correspond or roughly take place in the same time frame as episodes of classic Star Trek, it is our final year in classic Star Trek for the Ensign's Log. So this is going to be a good year, a good season, a lot of fun. So check out season 3 starting, dropped just today, or go back and listen to the first 2 seasons as well if you haven't listened to the Ensign's Log. It's a ton of fun. And if you dig the Star Trek stuff that I do on this channel and you haven't listened to it, hopefully you'll really like the Ensign's Log. That's it, everybody. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you to everybody in the live chat for the questions and the comments and everything. And Caroline, does Jason look like a Star Trek doll? If I had a Harry Mudd doll, he might look a little bit like Harry Mudd. We'll do that. If I had a Harry Mudd doll, I could make that into a Jason doll a little bit. But yeah, thank you all so very much for joining me and for everything. I apologize again if I missed anybody's questions in the live chat, and I will see you again in a few weeks to do another one of these. So until then, please, everybody, be careful. Watch out for yourselves. Watch out for each other. Take care. And I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.